Welcome to the Leadership in Yoga podcast, hosted by me, Shawna Krueger. And on this podcast, I'll be bringing you interviews with exceptional leaders in the yoga world alongside trainings and tips so you can experience true breakthroughs and help others do the same. What's good? Welcome into another episode of the Leadership in Yoga podcast. And today I'm excited to bring you a podcast that I am raring to go. I have this thing all planned out. I'm going to admit to you that I've been a little bit more spontaneous with my episodes for the past couple of weeks since moving to Austin and having the podcast launchpad and a bunch of different moving pieces. And I'm happy to say, and I'm honestly proud of myself, that I can just sit down and hit record and start talking and have generated a theme and kind of a general outline in my mind beforehand. But I also want to get back to the essence of what this podcast is really about. And the core of this podcast is and was always intended to be on the subject of teaching yoga. And there's a lot more to it than that because, of course, everything that we are and our business and our teachings, they are related to our lifestyle and they're related to everything that we do and everything that we believe. And I love getting into all that different stuff. But today I want to take us through an actual episode that is quite focused on the art of teaching a yoga class. And my original intention with this podcast today was actually to talk about teaching in the classroom and then also talk about teaching when we show up as a retreat leader, for example, or in an event space or in a space that is outside of the traditional yoga studio space. But I can already tell you that that is going to be a part 2. So as I mentioned that, please take a moment to subscribe. Please take a moment to drop me a rating. And I know if this is maybe the first time you're listening to me, you're like, why should I do that? But I am telling you, if you've heard me say it a couple of times, it is really helpful if you actually take the time to do that. And it pays off because I just found out that my podcast was in the top 5% of video podcasts on Spotify for 2024, which I was absolutely out of my mind yesterday because I was not expecting any sort of general ranking like that. And to see it was really beautiful because it reflects an extreme amount of work that I've put into this project over the past 2 years. And what I've seen start to unfold has been a little bit mind-blowing. So as we're starting to think about ways that, I can make this sustainable for me, the best thing that you can do as a listener is to subscribe, to drop me a rating, and to share it with a friend. More and more often, I hear people say that after, 3 or 4 different people recommending my podcast, that then finally they decided to make the leap and to actually devote, an hour, 40 minutes to it and actually listen to it. So we need that sort of repetition, and it's helpful if you're able to share in that way. Bringing my focused energy back in because honestly, after yesterday, I was a little bit all over the place. And today as well, I was really excited to speak on this topic and I wanted to speak with the correct energy. And for some reason, it was just not there. I was not feeling it. And then all of a sudden, I can start to feel it well up. And I'm like, give me the mic, set everything up. Here we go. I had a camera complete malfunction. I don't know how the video and this is going to turn out, but I was like, you know what? Screw it. The people need to hear the message. So I'm here to deliver the message to you. And as I speak about things like being in the top 5% and stuff like that, I really want to emphasize that even though I speak to that, the only reason that that excites me at all is because what I want to show ultimately, what my goal with all of this is to show you that your dreams, your wildest dreams, your biggest dreams are for people like you. Your dreams are not for people who are more popular, people who are richer, people who you think are prettier, people who you think are wiser, more well-spoken, older, younger, right? It's not for any of those people. The dreams are for you, and you don't need to change anything about yourself in order to start working towards them. I believe that we are each a magnetic match to the beauty of our wildest dreams. And for that reason, I wanted to share that little piece on the 5%. And I also want to say that it's the same with teaching yoga. The kind of class that you want to teach is for people like you. being a yoga teacher is for people like you, right? There's not any sort of limitation or kind of person that you must be, that you think you need to be in order to start sharing with the world, in order to start developing yourself as a teacher. So with that in mind, I want to get us straight on into the agenda. And this is what we're going to do today. Basically, I'm going to walk you through different class considerations. This is going to be kind of a rapid fire pieces and ideas episode. I'm not here to give really any advice, right? This is the no advice podcast, but I am here to draw attention to different things that have been blind spots for me, that have been light bulb moments for me, and things that I've also picked up from 50 plus interviews with other teachers at this point that have been of interest to me. I'll have some book recommendations as well for you. And I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And I will just start this off by saying that I wish you the absolute best in your teaching journey. And thank you for doing what you do. By the way, I don't think I've ever said that on this podcast, but thank you. If you're someone who is taking the time to sit down and contemplate how it is that you're showing up for other people, that's really cool. And you should congratulate yourself for that, because that is where the true change makers in this world appear. That is where they're born, and they have already been born as a seed, at least within you, even if you haven't started actually teaching yoga yet. So here we go. I'm going to just jump in. I feel like I say that every episode. I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to jump in. This has like become my new circle back in my old corporate language. It just like sneaks in there sometimes. But the number one answer when I ask the guests on this episode, what makes an exceptional yoga teacher or what makes an exceptional leader, I always thought that they would give me sort of a tangible, tactical answer to that question. And nobody has ever given me an answer really like that. They've all been much more about the way that this particular teacher was being, the way that this particular teacher was making them feel. And my intention with the question was obviously to get to the specifics, but it's really much more about the state of being, and sort of the energetic match between the student and the teacher, which could be frustrating, right? Because when you say, well, then how can I, like, what say do I really have in that? And I definitely think that there is a lot that you can do, even if it seems super subtle and you feel like it sounds too woo-woo, too, spiritual. And maybe that's not the case, because I know that I'm talking to other people who are interested in yoga and these softer topics of energetics oftentimes. But really do it, start off before you're thinking about teaching just your ultimate class, your best class ever. And I used to really hate that. One of my teachers in teacher training would say, you got to think about teaching the best class ever. And I didn't like that, because I felt like that's so much pressure. And what do you mean the best class ever? I mean, I'm going to teach many classes. They can't all be the best class ever. But I've grown to actually admire this contemplation of what is the best class ever, and in this contemplation and understanding my own energy and what I'm able and what I'm capable of as a teacher, this is where I started to understand, okay, I cannot teach 8 to 10 classes a week. And you might say that's nothing, right? Because I know people who teach 20, but I can't. For me and what I aim to deliver, and we'll talk more about that, my magic sweet spot is probably around 3 to 4 classes a week is really energetically what makes sense for me, because I focus a lot on getting myself into state. And that is not always the case. I'm not always able to get myself perfectly into state before every single class. And I would strongly suggest against having a particular routine that you just have to do before you teach. Otherwise, you are superstitious or you think that you're not ready. I used to do that before cross-country races when I was running, and I had this very specific set of things that I had to do. And if I didn't do them, then I worried that I wouldn't be doing well in the race. or I would just get totally thrown off my game. So instead of having a routine, a specific routine that you follow step by step to get yourself into state, I'd recommend thinking about having maybe a toolbox, a couple of things that you know work for you in different circumstances, and taking a moment just to ask yourself and pause and say, okay, what would I really benefit from right now? What actually sounds good to me right now? Definitely taking preventative measures, sleeping and doing a somewhat regular practice and all of that other simple but extremely difficult to do sort of things is the best way, in my opinion, to manage your ability to get into state and to be able to get into a focused flow where you're able to show up very present for people. But it's not always possible. So having that sort of toolbox, and when I think about that toolbox for me, I sit down and I consider, especially if I'm feeling off. Okay, if I'm feeling off and I'm feeling a hesitancy, I'm feeling that sort of old anxiety towards teaching come back up. And maybe you're a brand new teacher, and so you have the anxiety of the unknown. Identifying, okay, is this putting me into kind of one of those more sleepy states? Do I feel slow? Or do I feel almost tired? Or do I feel the opposite? Do I feel wired out? Do I feel like my brain is running? What is it exactly that I'm feeling? And how do I hope to make my students feel? Because I want to put myself into the direction that I hope for my students to feel. So if I'm going to go and teach a yin class, which I don't teach, so I shouldn't be giving advice on, but if I'm feeling really wired out, I'd want to do something to bring myself into a more calm state. If I'm already feeling sleepy, I might want to bring myself up a little bit so I'm not giving sleepy energy during the yin. Hopefully that's making sense. Generally speaking, in my case, I'm going to teach a very energetic class. I like to get people into a trance state of sorts. And we're going to talk about trance because I think it is an important aspect of understanding what makes a yoga class that people are just flipando. They're just excited about it afterwards. But I want to get myself usually into a state where I feel confident. I feel I can bring a strong energy and I can actually lift people up a little bit higher, give them more energy, essentially. So what that might look like is dancing with loud music. It's got to be loud. It may look like doing a Wim Hof breath work, which is on YouTube. It's probably 11 minutes. And I think if you're stress planning and cramming for a class, you'd be much better off to do a Wim Hof breath work, in my opinion, from my experience, than to stress about studying your sequence or adding any final touches. And if it's not one of those two things, it may be sitting quietly. Usually what it takes for me is to just focus my attention on one single thing. And it doesn't matter so much what it is that I choose to focus on, but the most important is that I shut off the day-long switching between tasks, the looking at my phone, opening my computer, working, getting inspired, writing here, switch, 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 and just channel all the energy into one solid thing. So that's what I will say on getting yourself ready. And you'll ultimately have to kind of create your own toolbox for this and actually do it. I'll give you that little piece of homework right off the bat. Think also about the way that you're presenting yourself. Part of it is the subtle underlying energy, but the other big part of it is the way that you are presenting your vibe, the way that you are presenting yourself to the class. And something that I've noticed in a lot of yoga spaces is that there's almost like this too cool for school vibe that teachers will develop. And I don't blame teachers. Sometimes I feel like it's not done in a way that is like, I'm better than you or anything like that. It also can be nerves. When we're nervous, it almost feels like we're standoffish, but that standoffish doesn't necessarily translate to the students in the way that you think it does. So one of my favorite things to recommend is be social before class. Don't be preparing, cramming, thinking about your sequence, needing like backstage like sacred time or something like that. be ready, like be already in state when you show up to the studio if possible, or get there earlier enough so that you can actually get yourself into that state once you arrive, if that's what you need to do. But say hello to people and break the ice. Ask them if they like assists. Ask their names. Actually, try to learn people's names. Write them down. It's a lot of work, but I think it really pays off, especially if you're a newer teacher trying to establish yourself. And even if you're an established teacher and you can start to learn, start to learn the people's names who are really supporting you, because without them, what would you have? What would we really have without the people that most support and care and love for us? So less of a coming out on stage sort of beginning of class and more of a gathering energy is what I would recommend. Let's talk about sequence too. Have a sequence that you could pull out from the back of your head at any moment. And I was struggling to understand what it was that I wrote in my notes. I wrote like a life ring, essentially. Because when we know that we have a life ring, usually we don't need to use the life ring. I, for a long time, had a life ring that was symbolic, and it is this little black notebook that I wrote down all my sequences in. This is when I just started teaching, and I was reinventing my sequences every single class because I wanted to be creative and I wanted to be entertaining to people. I wanted to do well. I wanted people to like my class, and I really cared, and I still do care. But that care and that desire to sort of reinvent the wheel every time left me always kind of questioning in the back of my head if I would ever draw a blank and not remember at all what I was about to say. So I carried this book with me. And the funniest fact of it is that I probably carried this book for maybe my first 5 or 6 months teaching, and I never once opened it. Like, it has this little elastic strap over the top of it, and I never ever took off that little elastic strap once I started class because I never actually needed it. But I needed that book to be there, and it would like cause me anxiety because I would be leaving the house and I would realize that I'd forgotten my black books. I would go back, and it was this whole thing. So I think instead of that, what would have been more helpful to me is to have developed some sort of skeleton flows. And maybe I would have created 3 different versions of them so that I could cycle through them. But I would know exactly what was there for me, what I could teach at any given moment if I ever had to sub last minute or if I ever completely drew a blank in class. There's this interview that I've been listening to recently with Rick Rubin and Jack Harlow, which is fantastic, by the way, if you need something else to listen to after this and you're tired of hearing me speak. Otherwise, I have other recommendations for you as well in my show. But Jack Harlow is talking about how much he likes to write instead of freestyle. And when he started freestyling, he felt like his music lost a lot of its deeper meaning. And what he ended up instead was having this really fun flow, this catchy, popular flow to his music, but it didn't feel completely aligned. It didn't feel completely authentic. He even says that he felt bad because he would be in the studio with other rappers and he would be slowing them down because he would have to go and write and he wouldn't be able to just freestyle and jump in. And so gradually he started working that muscle, the freestyle muscle. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what he enjoys doing now is coming back to that action of writing. And Rick Rubin's point was that, well, sometimes when you freestyle, you essentially stumble across something extraordinary just by accident. And what I took away from this whole thing, and when I started to think about myself and ask, is that true? Because yes, now I do freestyle my podcast, even how I'm speaking now. I just have some bulleted points down. I don't script my podcast like I used to. And I do think that when you freestyle, some pretty extraordinary things come in. You have that potentially that ability to channel, whether or not you believe in true channeling or you believe in more of an ability to just start to connect the dots faster and A lot of that is things that we have maybe heard in different ways, rearranged, and we're able to rearrange them essentially on the fly. I believe that all of that kind of stuff happens when we are relaxed. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm in an absolute panic and I'm terrified and I have to freestyle, I don't think anything real extraordinary is coming out of that because I'm in survival mode and I'm in protection mode. Now, that's just me. There are other people and other personalities who might have more of a, fuck it, just let's see what comes out sort of attitude, and they could do really well. But I know myself and I know many others who don't necessarily have that natural confidence standing in the middle of the room. And especially when you're leading movement and you're feeling responsible for people on top of that. So maybe all of this is just to say, have some sort of a sequence, some sort of a class that you like, that you find is valuable. It doesn't mean you need to go study a set sequence. You may wish to, you may create your own, but have something that you know so well that you can mess it up and you can still teach it because you will mess it up at some point. And then hopefully from that state of relaxation, then you can start to freestyle, whether that is in the movement or whether that is in the things that you're actually saying and sharing. I think that's the point where you can start to let that natural additional pieces that we so want to force because we want to sound like Ram Dass and we want to say all the things, and at a certain point, it feels forced, it feels repetitive. That's why we hear the same phrases often repeated over and over in class. It's not at all surprising to me that that happens, and yet I would challenge you to start to move away from that as much as you can. Also with assists, and then we'll get into a little bit of the more intangible sides of teaching. Get as many reps with assists as you can. Hands-on assisting, I mean. Invest in trainings and actually practice what you've learned on anyone that you can. And I do not suggest positioning yourself necessarily as somebody who is wanting to test out things on paying students, but you can get creative. You can think of ways of framing it where you could say, I'm looking for volunteers this class who would who would be willing to give feedback on the assist that I give them. I don't know, get creative. You can do this. Practice on your friends too, but in those first 5 minutes of class, start to think about breaking the ice on your assisting, because if it doesn't happen then you think, well, just once I get through sun salutations, I'll do it. Just once I get through the standing, and when they're in the seated, it's going to be easier. And then you get to the end of the class and you're like, well, there I go again. Maybe I should just give up because I didn't do it, right? And then you get that rhetoric that goes in your head. And so try to just set that little goal. You're going to do one assist, just one, first 5 minutes of class. The rest of the class, you're off the hook. Just do that one. Probably what you'll notice is that once you do the first one, the second one, you start to get in the flow of it. You start to be able to see them a little bit more. Okay, pacing and rhythm of the class are arguably two of my favorite subjects of this whole experience of teaching yoga. And I will be the first to tell you that I'm definitely not here to lecture on different anatomical cues or precision cues. I will talk about cueing in the way that I've found it to be effective and the ways that I find that it's not effective. But pacing and rhythm of the class have been some of the biggest game changers for me. And as I observe, and I really try when I go to take a yoga class, and as a fellow yoga teacher, if you are one, you may relate to this. It is hard sometimes to disconnect from your observations of the experience and just to enjoy the yoga for what it is and to not need it to be anything other than that. But in my observations that I have gathered against my will at times, it is absolutely pacing, musicality, I like to call it, of the class. That is what separates the good from the great, in my opinion. And musicality is an interesting one because we say often, oh, I want to flow with the music. But if you think about it, how often are we actually flowing with the music and in a sense of using the rhythm truly? How often are the counts matching up? And if we're not a dancer, I'm not a trained dancer, but I do have some knowledge of things like salsa dancing and stuff that I've learned later in life. And it got me thinking about this because I saw that there's also something called 4-beat yoga, for example. And I started to actually count out and listen to my yoga playlists. And this is so nerdy. You don't need to do this. But I started to listen to my yoga playlists and I started to say, okay, how could I count this out? If this is a 4-beat song, because most songs are in the general sense. So that is probably an incorrect statement. But in the ones that I was counting, they were 4 count. And I would start to count it out and I'd go inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. And I was thinking about it. I was like, there's no way in class that I had been previously thinking about that. I try a little bit, but it's actually it's quite difficult, right? To get people moving exactly with the music. And more often than not, I'd say the big thing to watch out for is, are you having people move slow and then the music is just blaring fast and crazy? I am such a culprit of this. I did this for so long. I really try not to do it anymore, but it's something that happens quite frequently. The easiest is, in terms of musicality, is to have that really intense music in intense moments where you know you're having people holding Navasana, or like they're going through these. If you're a power teacher, it would be easier as well. But all too common is this fast music and slow movement. And so I want to highlight it. I want to say that I don't vibe with that. I don't know if you vibe with it, but that is definitely something to take into consideration, and start to just listen to your playlist back, or start to listen to some songs that you have in mind for key moments of your class, like the sun salutations, and start to speak over it and see how it goes. Throughout class, instead of having it be like a flat line, it can be really beautiful to have moments where you take up the intensity and then you take down the intensity. And this can just involve turning up the music and turning down the music. I know that when I first started, I would just want to put a playlist and leave it on that. And I still don't really skip around too much. I stay more or less true to my playlist, but I turn it all the way down. If it's not the perfect song for the moment and I want to take it lower and I don't have a slow song on easy access at that moment, I'll turn the music all the way down. Let there be silence. Trust in the silence, essentially. We'll talk about trusting in the silence as well in just a moment. But pay attention to the music level, you know? Don't be afraid to blast it and turn it up, but also don't be yelling over the top of it. Don't be afraid of hitting the extremes so much that you accidentally end up doing one of them. That's also another phenomenon that I've noticed within myself as well. So speed of the movement, music level, and all of this combined with your voice can be used in a way to essentially create trance state. Trance state, and I looked this up out of interest, and I asked ChatGPT to tell me about how people can teach in a way that induces trance state, and then I'll tell you my own thoughts. But it said, to teach in a way that induces a trance-like state in people, focus on creating a calm and relaxed environment using repetitive language, rhythmic patterns, imagery, while guiding their attention inward, encouraging deep relaxation and visualization techniques, and maintaining a consistent, soothing tone of voice. I believe that trance state can be accessed in moments of high energy. It's not just about getting relaxed and into the state, but we know that we can get in the zone in various different activities. I think the key ones to highlight here are the repetitive rhythmic patterns, and also the consistent tone of your voice. Not to say that we should sound completely the same the entire way through class. I think that when you can hit it in a way that feels like it carries people through, and you're not all of a sudden like blah and sorry, I hope that didn't hurt your ears. You're not all of a sudden blasting people with something entirely different and shocking them, unless that is what you're actually trying to do in that particular moment. But play around with this. Listen to the teachers that you really enjoy, that you, at the end of class, you feel in the zone, and do a little analysis, because one of my favorite teachers that is able to do this and has this gift is somebody that I have interviewed several times on this podcast, David Kyle. And I actually have an interview with him recently as well. I have two. And I've asked him about this both times, because it's the thing that most stands out to me about the experience is the way that certain teachers' voices can just carry you through, essentially. It's also in the gene keys, as I've been reading and studying, that when a teacher is truly gifted, they have a way of bringing information to students in a way that can be absorbed. So it's not just about packing their brain full of every cue that you possibly know and all of the fancy names. None of that is actually as important, in my opinion, as the overall experience and sense that they are getting at the end of that class. The more complex, the more talented, the more experience, I guess I should say, in teaching yoga that you have, then you're able to start to integrate all of that while not losing that central tone of voice. So much of teaching yoga, in my opinion, is learning to read the room. Learning to read the room and reacting to what you see. Because we all have had this, if you've been teaching for a while, where you have a class where you have a complete beginner and you have somebody who is, 10 steps ahead of everybody else the entire time, and trying to balance out that effect. But it's really not as bad once you start to actually see them individually and see what's going on. One of my favorite books that speaks to this topic of learning to actually see people is Teaching People, Not Poses by Jay Fields. And I would love to have her in for an interview. So let's manifest that together right now and visualize me speaking to Jay Fields so she can give us all of the knowledge on this topic. But once you see people, then you're able to actually enter into a dialogue with them. If you can get yourself present enough by releasing the tendency to just repeat things that you've heard before, or say the things that you think you should say, and not say anything unless it looks like it's actually applicable, what you're about to say, then that's where I think the magic really starts to click. It can be distracting to have full-on conversation during class. So I'm not suggesting that that's what you do. I'm suggesting that you think about your cueing and your guidance of class as a conversation where the students are not necessarily responding to you verbally, but you're picking up on what they're giving and you're continuously giving that back to them and leading them in the direction that you would like to go, essentially. One of my favorite examples of this kind of talking during teaching a yoga class is by one of my friends and my favorite yoga teachers in Seattle, and someone who's taken over several classes for me since I left, Stephanie Wu. So shout out to you, Stephanie, love you. But I took one of her first classes over a year ago now, probably a year and some change. I can't remember exactly. But I remember that I loved the class, and I remember telling her afterwards, you're already a really good teacher and you're going to be a fantastic teacher. Because it's in the simplest things where I could tell that she was able to process in the moment and instruct as if she was just teaching someone how to do something without needing to make it necessarily fancy. And the best thing about it is that it was resonating. And I remember she told us, to fold our mats, and she paused and people were looking like which direction, and she said, hot dog way, like, and I'm explaining it if you can't see the video, but when you fold a piece of paper in elementary school and we're told, okay, fold it hot dog way or fold it hamburger way. And she used that description of folding it that way, and everybody laughed, but then everybody immediately got it. And I adore when people say things like that, where that what they're saying is like just the thing that they needed to say in that moment in order to get it to click for you. And that's why I think a lot of times students will have epiphanies where suddenly they understand something they didn't before, because you're actually directing it at them and you're not just having a sort of yoga teacher monologue of some long spiel of things. So really targeted, essentially, is what I mean by that. But how can we actually learn to read the room? Often, I know that we look at the faces of people and the expressions, and we don't want to get too caught up in that, because people will stone face you all the time in yoga. Whether or not that's what they're actually feeling on the inside is hard to tell. So letting people have their own experience without judging for them. But also remember that this room space is your room. You're holding the space. You are creating the space for them. And so don't be afraid to put your direction in there and say it all together. I love this one in Sun Salutations when the pacing is off and we've got people far behind or people ahead. I'll say, this is the quickest part of class, so this is going to feel fast. And then that helps usually with the people who are lagging full behind. And then I'll say, all together, wait for your neighbor, for the people who are going fast. And those subtle sort of directive cues to get people into the space that you are creating. So you're reading the room, you're understanding where they're at, but that doesn't mean that you need to suddenly stoop to the level, is not the correct phrase, but you don't need to suddenly then be on the level of all of the people in the room at once. It's more about understanding where different people are at and the direction, again, that you want to have them move, as I discussed in the beginning of the episode, when you're preparing your own state in an ultimate situation, of course. You can also use what I like to call the shock effect, and I literally just invented this as I was writing down these notes this morning. I don't know if this actually exists, but I'm going to use it in the term of teaching to describe the moments of intensity. I know that the best way to do this is actually to not have people feeling entirely shocked and out of their minds the entire class. It's better if you can feed them a little bit and then they get the satisfaction of having made it. And then that's where you change the pace. You get back to base. I've been doing these cardio workouts recently, which is a tangent. I have an episode on running if you want to know why. As a former competitive distance runner, I'm suddenly running again. But I've been doing these cardio running workouts, and there's something called back to base. So you go back to that steady level where you're running, you feel the class, you know that you're moving, but you're not at your edge, like, holy shit, I don't know if I can do another 5 seconds of this. And you'll see it in people's faces when they start to get to that point. And the nature of it is, if you're teaching a advanced class, some students may feel like that the whole time. But try to throw them a line, throw them a rope, throw them a life ring, give them an out for different things. Make sure that, if possible, they're able to get back to base, because once they've gone up to a peak and they've gone back to base once or twice, then they say, okay, I understand what's going on now, and I can actually do this. Basically, a series of small wins is definitely going to help people start to believe in themselves. And I love when people start to believe in themselves. That's when I think they unlock the magic for themselves truly, is in that act of believing in themselves. And also being pushed in the moments when it's time to push. Confidence as a yoga teacher, this is such a big one. My number one tip for this, and this is another one that I observe all of the time, and I observe it in myself. I even want to do it right now as I'm speaking to you. And I want to say so badly, I'm sorry, my voice sounds like it's a little bit dying because I've been talking all day and yesterday I was screaming in joy or whatever, and I start to excuse away the fact that my voice sounds as it does, but really you're not here to have me tell you about the reason why the quality of the thing that I'm giving you is less than it ideally should be. Because number one, then I feel like I'm getting cheated out of something that I didn't know that I was feeling like I was getting cheated out of. And number two, your drama is not my problem. I'm there as a student to release all of that. And so yes, there's an element of being authentic and true, but often I see it being made about the teacher rather than the practice of the yoga itself. So do not excuse yourself away. This is your class, and you want people to feel invited into it, but you're not a machine. You're not perfect. You don't need to be. You're not expected to be. And let that be enough. Let whatever state you're coming with, you did your best, and now that is enough. And you also don't need to ask permission to express and teach in the way that you want to teach. This is another big one where there's almost this element of, and I'm going to exaggerate for effect, well, this is just my opinion, and I know that lots of people have different opinions on it, and so it's totally okay if you don't like this and actually you don't want to do this, so you can just feel free to just tune this out and to not do that. But if it's okay, what I would invite you to do is, and it's like, oh my God, just say the thing. If I don't want to do the thing, I'm not going to do it. But that level of excusing yourself away and asking for permission conveys a lack of confidence in what it is that you have to share. And I'm sorry, but that is the truth. So see if you can allow people to feel held by your energy. Show up with what you've got, give them another option. That's the great thing about it. You don't need to my way or the highway, but you don't need to excuse away the my way of this, because it's your class and what you have to share is important. So remember that. I've used this example before, but I recently went to stand-up comedy and I absolutely cringed and I felt so uncomfortable for most of them. And the reason why is not because their jokes were bad, but I could tell that they were doubting themselves the entire time. And there is nothing more uncomfortable than being in the presence of somebody who is trying to hold a leadership role or trying to do a public speaking activity, and you're feeling nervous for them because they're showing up in a way that is basically putting and airing out their lack of confidence. Confidence is such a tricky one. I've got many episodes on confidence if you want to get more into this, but let me just say that you don't need to have anything profound to say. You don't need to make small talk. If you're feeling like you're not your most confident self that day, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Let the yoga speak for itself. The yoga will speak for itself. It's movement. It feels good. It's in community. It's going to be great. So don't worry too much about it. On your expression and your voice, pay attention to things like tone, your cadence, your intonation. A big one here is the act of questioning. And this is where every single sentence that you say kind of it's like it's in a question. And then when you go and you say another sentence, it's also not exactly a complete sentence because the end of it is trailing upwards. It's like everything you say is da, da, da. And that also can be really distracting, and it can bring a sense of lack of confidence, even if that's entirely not intentional. Record yourself teaching, by the way. Really do this. This is like a mandatory once per year sort of thing that I do. And I try to actually make it a live class that I'm teaching. And you could do this super secret just with a voice note on your phone. You could just be recording a voice note of the class and set it near where you are most of the time and listen to how it is that you sound. This is also why I love podcasting, because you constantly learn new things that you can change about the way that you are speaking. Definitely watch out for a couple of things here. There's a way of teaching that sounds like you're narrating, where everything is ending in an ing. lifting the arms up overhead, looking upwards, exhaling, folding forward. This, at the end of the day, it's your choice. I find it to be incredibly distracting, and I've heard from others as well that it's very distracting. So I would recommend to teach like you were teaching someone how to actually do something. Like I was talking about earlier with the example of Stephanie. It's giving direction that just makes sense when you're looking at people. Lift your right leg up, not lifting the right leg up. It sneaks in there every now and then, okay, it's fine. But there's also a battle between using the versus your. So lift the right leg versus lift your right leg. I tend to prefer and aim to use lift your or move your, or using that language again that makes people feel seen. It makes them feel like I'm speaking directly to them because I am. You might also want to watch out for phrases like, if you're able to do XYZ thing, able, or if you're strong enough, right? That kind of stuff can be replaced with one of my favorite phrases, which is, if you are feeling playful. This is a phrase that I picked up from Ashish, a fantastic yoga teacher in the Seattle area, if you're there. Direct invitation to play and try something, to make noise, and all of that can also be helpful for people wanting to try things. Discussion of food, of toning or changing parts of the body can be easily replaced with words about power and maybe like personal power, strength, maybe, but super eyes out for that one. I feel bad, but I definitely judge when I hear people talking about that if it's not the place for it, because I just feel strongly about that one. But we're not here to hear my personal rants. So on cues, this is the last little piece of the podcast that we'll do today. So cueing, there's several different philosophies on this one. What I found to be very effective is the pattern of breath, name of the pose, and then describe the action. So inhale, Urdhva Hastasana, arms up. You don't want to make it clunky for people who do know the pose. So the danger of, if we were looking at a pose like half moon, for example, and you want people to do the pose and you start to describe it and you say, on your next inhale, start to bend your knees, shift your weight forward, plant your hand down, maybe start to reach the hand up, stack the hips, all the other things. And then people, they're not going to listen to that as much as you want them to. They're going to be looking around, looking at you, like trying to figure out like, where the hell are we doing? What are we doing? And if you just say half moon, the people that know the half moon, I mean, that's the beauty of yoga and the repetition of postures, they can get into it. And it's kind of like a chain effect, because then everybody else has examples around them. And then you can start to fine tune the movement. That's my philosophy. The other thing that I like that I've heard people do is they'll say, think XYZ pose now, start to blah, 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 blah as you inhale. And they'll say, think about the pose in your head. It's coming up, like wait for it. It's not right now, but it's coming. Now I'm going to tell you to breathe and do these movements. So that's another way that you could do it. Also in cueing, as I mentioned, I wanted to speak on is trust in the silence. If you don't know what to say or you don't have anything to say, that's okay. Let it be silent. You can even say that to tell to your students as well. Trust in the silence in this moment. Just enjoy the practice, or I'll try to be a little bit quieter during this practice so that you can be with yourself, or whatever. It's all part of the experience is one of my other favorite ones to say when something weird happens. Like in the studio, I had somebody come in about 2 weeks ago. They came into the lobby and there was nobody at the front desk at this moment. And they're standing there and they start to wave aggressively at me. And I have everybody in a forward fold and prasaritas. And I'm like, I can't right now. I'm teaching, I'm kind of busy. And then he proceeds to open the door to the studio. And he goes in, and with shoes on, by the way, and is like, can I use the bathroom? Like, I really need to use the bathroom. And I was like, okay, whatever you need to do, just please go, And then afterwards he shut the door. I was like, all right, refocusing. It's all part of the experience, and you can just feed that stuff into the experience of the yoga itself without making it a joke or without making it light, but it's really all part of the experience. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope that this fuels your fire for teaching in studio classes or classes online, perhaps as well. And next time, we're going to be talking about teaching at retreats and in non-traditional spaces. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to share, subscribe if you haven't already done that. Sending you a virtual high five and a hug for that. And the emoji that we're going to end today's episode with is the emoji that is the face, the little emoji with the 2 eyes and the no face. And the reason why is because that is the most unpopular emoji of all time, according to my internet research. So send the no face emoji into the comments on Spotify just for the fun of it. Raise its standings and its status a little bit, perhaps. And I'll catch you in the next episode. Ciao, ciao. If you enjoyed this episode of the Leadership in Yoga podcast, please take a moment to drop me a rating and subscribe. Also, if you're able to share this podcast with the world, it is greatly appreciated. Thank you.